Good morning, good afternoon, and good night to everyone watching or listening live or on demand. I am Austin, and Devin is back. That is not Grant.
I'm
That is not this
back.
guy. Oh God, no, no,
Hey,
no.
dude.
Because what happened after Cam did that was the
Hey,
problem.
dude. The thing is, I told the world about a year and a half ago, Cam Newton is cooked. Sadly for you guys, I haven't used the oven in about 2 weeks, so I can't possibly be cooked. But speaking of getting cooked, man, the Phoenix Suns, they were well done after last night's performance. But Austin, I'll let you take
The
that away.
sun exploded. The
Supernova.
sun has vanished.
Supernova. We haven't talked NBA in a very long time, my friends, and we said we're not going to cover any more NBA for a while. As I said before, I'm back. The point is,
Yeah,
in a slow week of baseball, the NFL is in purgatory. Devontae Adams is a Raider, and Tom Brady just signed a fucking kingpin level deal with Fox Sports. But we can't talk about that for an hour, so the NBA it is.
Yeah, we were looking at episode topics and didn't have anything. And the playoffs are going on, and luckily everyone finished up. We don't cover hockey here, but hockey had one of the most wildest weekends of all time with 5 Game 7s over the course of Saturday and Sunday. So if you're a hockey fan, you probably had a wonderful time.
If you're a
Hockey
Maple
is
Leafs
a
fan,
wild ass sport.
I'm praying for you because, dear God, it has to get better at some point. And to
It
Connor
can't.
McDavid,
It won't.
if Connor McDavid is ever listening to this, just keep it up, man. Connor McDavid is fucking crazy. Like
Yeah.
I collect sports cards personally, and I was on eBay one day and I saw one of his like Young Guns cards, and I was like, this shit's expensive. I was like, this guy must be really fucking good. And yeah, the results are in. Connor McDavid is fucking insane.
Yeah.
But speaking of insanity,
Let's just kick it off straight up. We're going to talk about the 4 teams that are here. We'll start with the Boston Celtics, who beat the Milwaukee Bucks 109-81 in Game 7 of the conference semifinals. Devin, we will not have a repeat champion. Why not?
so, this is a confrontation that's been building all year to a certain extent. This Milwaukee Bucks team under current construction was good, but it was not as good as last year's team. If I'm correct, they lost a couple of pieces in the offseason, not super duper important parts. But Milwaukee's run last year, it was kind of just lightning. I wouldn't call it lightning in a bottle because Giannis is arguably the best player on the planet today. And in order to win championships, having the best player on the court is super important and super valuable, especially in basketball. Chris Middleton being out since the first round is a really, really hard thing to overcome. He is not only their second best scorer on the roster, he's arguably their closer. Whenever Giannis can't really get to the paint at will, he's a guy where you can kind of pass the ball off. He can spot up as a shooter. He can get his own shot, and he can kind of be a calming force for that offense because without him, they were asking guys like Pat Connaughton and Grayson Allen and a myriad of others to step into roles that they aren't really accustomed to over the grand scheme of a full season. But that's not to discount this Boston Celtics team at all, because Ime Udoka and this Boston roster have been doing things defensively that I'm not saying I didn't expect, because they've been a really good defensive team all year, as evidenced with Marcus Smart taking home Defensive Player of the Year, evidenced by the first round series against Brooklyn, where they made Kevin Durant look human for the first time since he left OKC. And go ahead.
I think we talked about it offline. The Boston Celtics were the hottest team coming into the playoffs, and no matter what sport you follow, Devin's a Giants fan, so he knows this very well. When you go into the playoffs hot, it is a great time, because that's exactly what the Giants did in baseball, and that's what the Celtics are doing right now. They're right. I'm not saying they're a bad team, but they are riding a hot streak on a good team that's just carving through. Maybe 7 games isn't carving through the Milwaukee Bucks, but to take down the champs, and now you've moved on to face the Miami Heat, you have a distinct chance, strong chance to go to the finals.
Yeah, 100%. Like, by the All-Star break, the Boston Celtics had a losing record overall. and they turned that around to being the second seed in all of the Eastern Conference. And this isn't like the Eastern Conference that Austin and I grew up in, where the Eastern Conference was far worse than the Western Conference. I think they were really close in general compared to each other. Yes, there are better overall records, 1 through 8 for the East than we saw in the West this year. But even at that, Phoenix being so top heavy, which we'll get to later, really skewed the records for the West, in my opinion. But yeah, the Celtics were insane. If there was a team that I thought on paper could compete with this Milwaukee team, even with Chris Middleton being healthy, Boston's on the short list.
Well, and then they beat the shit out of the Nets. Like, granted, I know the Nets were a 7 seed, but the Nets had all the hype because they had all the players, and the Celtics just beat their ass.
The thing about the Nets is they have all the players, and all the players being Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. Like, yeah, it really pays to have superstars on a roster, but whenever that roster is not fleshed out with depth and talent to complement those superstar guys, because while Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum do not have the track record or accomplishments that a Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving do have, they are young and they are supremely talented. And not only do Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have better teammates, they have a better overall scheme out in Boston. Boston's roster, if I were to look up the Boston Celtics roster right now, I guarantee it's probably 10 deep, like in terms of actual players you could see day in and day out. So depth chart. So we're looking at, so their point guards are as listed: Marcus Smart, Derek White, and Peyton Pritchard. Shooting guard, you've got Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Aaron Nesmith. Small forward, Tatum, Brown, Grant Williams. Power forward, you got Al Horford, Grant Williams, and then Daniel Tice. At center, Robert Williams III, Al Horford, Daniel Tice. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That is 10 solid NBA players that can give you legitimate minutes in any playoff series. And it's highlighted by the Defensive Player of the Year in Marcus Smart, who, regardless of how you feel about it, won the award. A guy in Derek White, who they got at the trade deadline, which I think was an insane pickup for this roster because of his emergence for San Antonio a couple years back. He's a very skilled offensive player, and he provides hustle to this team whenever they need it. And now with Boston, what they didn't have a couple years back, Tatum and Brown were younger, especially in that series against Cleveland, and they lost to the Bucks in a series prior a couple years back. Grant Williams and Robert Williams are completely different players than what we saw in previous years for the Boston Celtics. The ascendance of a Robert Williams has been super huge for this roster because of the defensive versatility that he will give you. And it also brings into fact, we have to look at the fact that this team moved on from Kemba Walker and was able to get back in return an asset in Al Horford, who they had for years and eventually let walk. Al Horford's been paramount for this entire playoff run. He's been playing out of his mind.
So is it as simple as saying if Chris Middleton is healthy next season, the Bucks will be in the same exact spot that they are right now? Not saying they're going to lose the semifinals, but they will be right back in the semifinals next season. Or do they need to make a huge move? Like, what's next for them? Was it as simple as Middleton being out is a huge like you said, it is a huge reason why they lost to the Bucks. But does putting him back in the lineup next season immediately put him back in the NBA Finals conversation?
No. The East, as the A conference, got a lot better this offseason. Do I expect it to improve again this much? I'm not entirely sure. Milwaukee caught a very lucky break catching the Chicago Bulls in the first round. They were missing Lonzo Ball. They missed Caruso for a giant portion of the season. Chicago might not be back in the same way that they were this year. Zach LaVine can walk in free agency. I do not trust DeMar DeRozan as a top-flight NBA superstar. He's a star, and he's an all-star for sure. I'm not going to discount his greatness. Would I pay him the max to be my best player on a championship team? Probably not. But the problem with this Bucks team is a lot of their pieces are not getting younger, and their stars, while they are young, in Drew Holiday, Giannis, and Chris Middleton, these ancillary pieces and guys like George Hill, Wesley Matthews, Serge Ibaka, and Brook Lopez, they're just going to get another year older. So while I don't think this Bucks team isn't by any means going to rebuild coming off of this offseason, They do have some places where they would greatly benefit from retooling. So I expect them to be aggressive in the draft, possibly trying to make some offseason signings to get a bit younger and a bit more skilled at certain spots, because their top end talent, whenever it's all said and done and going, is really hard to beat. But if they're not fully healthy and Giannis isn't able to have guys like Middleton and Drew to be his Robins to his Batman, they are a very beatable team. Because while the Celtics might not have the top end of a Milwaukee Bucks due to the fact that Giannis is the best player on the court, and Middleton and Drew combined are close enough to Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown today, I think Jason's ascended a bit more in this postseason than we've seen in the past. I just think the Eastern Conference teams are getting better. There are teams that are far deeper than Milwaukee is, and if they refuse to try and get deeper, their road to another championship is not going to get easier. So Boston hit their stride at the perfect time. They're younger. They're deeper. This is what probably should have happened as soon as we realized Middleton was not going to play for the series.
Speaking of, I don't know where I'm going with this. It's as simple as this. The 76ers fall yet again. They lose their series 4-2 to the Miami Heat. Now, as someone who doesn't watch a shit ton of basketball, who isn't as knowledgeable in basketball as you are, the Miami Heat in 2020 felt like a pain in the side to everybody. Jimmy Butler played his heart out, but it wasn't enough to beat the Lakers in the bubble. Then they came back next season and played very well. Now they're coming through this season. I can't remember who they beat in the first round. Do you remember who they beat in the first round?
The Miami Heat?
Yeah.
They beat the Atlanta Hawks, who got in through the play-in tournament. They turned Trae Young into a version that looked far older.
They beat the Hawks 4-1. They beat the 76ers 4-2. Let's start with the 76ers. Acquired James Harden. You got Doc Rivers. You technically upgraded in coach, it felt like. But Doc Rivers has always had this thing where it's hung over his head, where he's never been able to get there. Joel Embiid falls short again. And James Harden didn't do jack shit in Game 6. So at what point, this isn't the process anymore. The process has been done. You had your Ben Simmons shit. You were able to get rid of Ben Simmons. You're kind of like the, chip on your shoulder, in a sense, the elephant in the room. You got him out. What's left to do when you can't even get to the conference finals, let alone the NBA finals? I feel terrible for 76ers fans because I don't know what happens next.
So Philadelphia, the problem with the Sixers is it's always one step forward and two steps back. As low hanging of the fruit it is, the 76ers are essentially, if the process was a thing, look at your bank statements from any transaction you've made today. It'll say processing, and that is Embiid's tenure in Philadelphia. I don't know if it's ever going to clear. I don't think the transaction's ever clear with this core, with this coach, and this organization. Joel Embiid, for everything that he has done to improve as a player, is still not the best guy on a championship team. Genuinely, I don't think there's a center in basketball today that will be the best guy on a championship team unless he has the proper supporting cast. Look at Nikola Jokic, this year's MVP, got bounced in 5 games by the Golden State Warriors because nobody on the wing could fucking dribble a basketball. That's not the center's fault, but it's a lot easier to win games whenever your guy can have the ball for most of the game, i.e. a Luka Doncic, who we will get to later. Philly has a lot of problems. Doc Rivers, I've never been a huge fan of his. I've seen him blow leads before. He got his championship in 2008. Good for him. Lost in 2010. He's been banking off of that championship in 2008 for the last 15 years, and there's nothing anybody can say or do about that. He's blown numerous 3-1 leads. He essentially gave the Houston Rockets a series against the Clippers in Chris Paul's prime. Like, if you want a guy to lose you close series in the playoffs, Doc Rivers is the man for you. Unless he's getting bailed out by superstar players, I just don't see him adding much value to rosters.
So would you say Doc Rivers, so we see a lot of these things of like, you choked a 3-1 lead, you did this and that. They're jokes. They're what they are. And, I I do believe in choking in the playoffs to a certain extent, but I believe some things are not considered choking. At this point, it's no longer a joke, is it? For Doc Rivers, it's no longer a joke. It's no longer, oh, he's gonna blow this 3-1 lead. Like, no, you're not gonna make it.
Doc
Does it
Rivers.
does it feel like a fundamental problem with Doc? Like, if you put a coach on the equal level that is Doc Rivers, is he taking this team further?
There's no upside with Doc Rivers as a head coach. You know who he is, you know what he does. And at this point, if I'm a player, I'm not super inspired by whatever the fuck he's going to bring to the table. See, the thing with the Heat compared to the Sixers is because the Sixers' biggest problem is from 2 off seasons ago whenever they gave a max offer sheet to a guy that scored 14 points in Game 6 in Tobias Harris when they could have re-signed a guy like Jimmy Butler. The Ben Simmons stuff mucked that whole situation up. But the Sixers went from being a hyper-aggressive team 3 seasons ago that were making moves to push for championships and trading assets for a guy like Tobias Harris and trading even more assets to acquire Jimmy Butler. I guess they got scared after Kawhi hit that game winner that really could have gone either way. In 2019, the Sixers could have been in that NBA Finals, and if Durant's Achilles still pops and Klay blows his knee out, Joel Embiid probably has a championship by now. But they came this close and said, fuck it, Jimmy, you're gone. Because Ben Simmons didn't want to play with him. It's befitting of a sports city that boos Santa Claus. The Sixers have a lot of problems. I think James Harden, while it's alarming how he's regressed over the last 6 to 12 months, I don't think he's the biggest problem this roster has. You cannot be paying Tobias Harris max level money and expect to be a true contender. I think James Harden's the best opportunity they're going to have at maximizing the talent on this roster.
I felt the same way. I felt like when they got James Harden, there was nothing else left to do. You have put everything in place to succeed, and then you didn't.
So if we're looking at James Harden's season this year, so he put up combined around 21.8 points per game, dished 10 assists per game, and gave you 7 rebounds a game, 7.5 rebounds. Yeah, James Harden's not going to score 35 points a game in this offense because that's not who James Harden is at this point in his career. He's lost a chunk of that speed and just explosiveness he had out in Houston. He's going to be 33 years old coming out of this offseason. I don't know many players that can sustain that level of excellence ever. LeBron James obviously is completely different, and the nutrition we have in today's game it far exceeds anything we've seen throughout the historical context of basketball. But James Harden just put up 20, 10, and 7 for a full year between 2 different teams. I get that he looked bad in the playoffs, but James Harden at current standing is at least a top 2 player Joel Embiid has ever had around him. Yeah. And I get not wanting to pay him $50 million a year on a max level extension. He has a player option. He's going to opt in this offseason, and fuck it. You let him opt in and you let him play, and then you extend him if he starts playing well. Because I think this is far from the last we're going to see out of a guy like James Harden. There's a reason why he got traded to Brooklyn, and I think the reasons why he left Brooklyn are totally justified. He was promised a team that had a definitive window to win championships, and whenever Kyrie Irving elected to not play basketball, which is his own right and his beliefs are of his own, which I fault him, nothing for that, but Harden is entitled to every right to feel a certain way about it. Whenever Kyrie and people are complaining about James Harden not doing things, when a guy's not even on the court, it's sour grapes. So I think Harden's going to get in the gym this offseason, work on his game, get in better shape, and I'm hoping we see a more agile and just improved James Harden in his first full year as a Sixer, because they have wasted too many prospects. They have traded away too many assets to not fully flesh this out. I say move Tobias Harris for some draft picks, or if you can get more depth out of a Tobias Harris, I would go ahead and do that 9 times out of 10. Danny Green tore his ACL in Game 6 because Joel Embiid fell on him. That was a gruesome injury. I hope Danny can come back super strong. That's not going to help their chances moving forward. Danny Green was a floor spacer and a solid defender for this roster. I don't know what to tell people. The problem with the Sixers is their best player hasn't been able to play more than. Let's just look at Joel Embiid's career. Okay, this is the simplest way to put it, for lack of better terms. Can the Sixers make the NBA Finals next year? My answer is no. We are looking at a player that just had his healthiest season ever as a pro. He played 68 games. 68 out of 82. His next best outing as a professional was 64. And from what we've seen from the guy and what I expect to happen as he ages, he's never been the most healthy player. I don't expect him to really. The thing with me and the Sixers this year, whenever people were like, you don't trade Ben Simmons for James Harden, like the whole trade with the Harden for Simmons and other parts, I'm like, Ben Simmons was a net negative for any roster he played for this year. He didn't touch a court. He didn't play this year. So letting Ben Simmons rot on your bench and having Andre Drummond and Seth Curry is not an improvement upon James Harden. Daryl Morey understands how important Joel Embiid is to this roster, but what people are failing to understand is every year Joel Embiid plays over 68 to 70 games and doesn't win a championship is a waste. He has never been this healthy, and there's no guarantee that he will continue to be this healthy. So a year where you get him at his full capacity and you don't do everything you can to fully flesh that out, it's a waste. It's like whenever Steph Curry missed a year. You can't afford to waste healthy, productive years of players in today's NBA. So Harden has to be back. I think Harris has to get moved. Maxey has to improve, and Tybal has to be able to play some offense because they have decent pieces. They need more depth. Every team could use more depth, but they should be a buyout candidate next year. But that leads me to talk about Miami. You were mentioning them in 2020. Their big problem, Goran Dragic got hurt. They played really hard for a very long time. Tyler Hero was a rookie. Tyler Hero's never played a lot of defense in his career. Duncan Robinson is not a defender. Anthony Davis and LeBron James. I will continue to say this until I am out of breath. Whenever they are fully healthy, I still have not seen a team beat them in 7 games. And that's a very Laker thing of me to say, but whenever LeBron James and Anthony Davis are healthy, there are few and far between in terms of more formidable duos the league has to offer. Because we saw it this year, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. If your top stars aren't going to play enough games together, shit doesn't work. Same thing happened this year for the Lakers. A season from hell, we traded all of our youth. Not the point. This is the Miami Heat of 2020 on crack. They upgraded Goran Dragic for Kyle Lowry. And the craziest part is that 2020 team, you replaced Jay Crowder with PJ Tucker, who is all of the player Jay was, probably better to certain extents. Bam Adebayo is a better version of himself. Jimmy Butler, for all the disrespect he gets as an offensive player, he's a stud. He's the best player that they have. He's one of the most complete players the NBA has. And while he is not the top end star talent that you will find in the league, he is a perennial all-star, and there's no two ways to try and job done. He is a consummate pro, and he plays with an intensity that a lot of these guys in the league just don't have. They have the 6th man of the year in Tyler Hero, who put up 20 points per game. Let me repeat that. 20 points a game off the bench. Tyler Hero is legit. Whenever your 4th string 2-guard and your 3rd string small forward is getting paid $90 million over 5 years, and Duncan Robinson, you're doing something right. They have found ways to exercise value out of guys that you probably haven't heard of, and I hadn't heard their name in a long time. They've got a guy in Max Strus that I could tell you right now, most people in my life have no idea who the fuck Max Strus is, and that's important because Miami is doing what every franchise wants to do. They are making guys that nobody knows into almost household names. And if you're from Miami-Dade County, Max Strus is a legend now. Caleb Martin has been playing out of his mind. It's the whole Jordan Poole effect. Well, Max Strus and Gabe Vincent and Caleb Martin are not on the same playing field as a Jordan Poole. Tyler Hero and Jordan Poole are in that same conversation. Teams are better whenever they find good players that have stuff where you don't usually find them, which is why Golden State now looks even more powerful with Jordan Poole ascending. Tyler Hero has ascended for the Heat, and alongside Hero being great, they now have pieces that make them even deeper. Gabe Vincent can play minutes. Victor Oladipo on his second rehab contract that he signed over the last 5 years is balling out for Miami. He helped them close out the series in the first round against the Hawks. So not only do they have veteran leadership in Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler, they have young talent in Bam Adebayo, Max Strus, Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, Caleb Martin. They have winners in PJ Tucker and Kyle Lowry. They have the best coach in the playoffs left in Eric Spoelstra, which Steve Kerr, we'll get to him. I like Steve Kerr a lot. Some people don't for some reason. But Eric Spoelstra, as of right now, is the best head coach left in this playoff run. Yeah. So you have the best coach, you have the deepest roster, and you have some of the better talent out of any of these teams. They're doing what they should do as the 1 seed, and I'm not surprised by any of it. Whenever I saw, and don't get me wrong, Philly fans, Joel was out for the first 2 games, and that really sucks. But Miami still shut down Maxey and James Harden in the games that Joel wasn't around. And even whenever Joel played, he wasn't putting up 30 points a game.
Right.
So Miami's doing something down in South Beach defensively that I don't think any team's going to be able to figure out unless Boston gets creative, which they can because Ime Udoka has been pulling rabbits out of the hat for the last 4 weeks.
So moving on we'll get to Boston and Miami in a bit. Getting to Steve Kerr. They beat the Memphis Grizzlies 110-96 in Game 6 to seal the series. Grizzlies lost John Morant. My phone just fell off my desk, and everything's falling apart. Look, we always knew the Warriors were going to be good. It's as simple as that. They were hurt for a very long time. They got their draft picks. They, just needed Green, Curry, and Thompson to be healthy to be a playoff caliber team. They are at that point. We talked about it earlier, how the Grizzlies probably wouldn't have been, or would have been more of a challenge with John Morant, and the Memphis Grizzlies could have taken this series. But in the end, being healthy is the best skill to have in the playoffs, and the Memphis Grizzlies just couldn't get there in terms of that.
Okay. So to put things into perspective, not to cut you off, Austin, for everyone that was surprised Golden State did so well this year, or the fact that they've been playing out of their minds and they're winning playoff series and they're back. No shit. No shit. Do you want to know the top 5 payrolls in all of basketball this year in the NBA? I'll go from 5 to 1. So do you want to hear them?
Sure.
Number 5 is Milwaukee, $162 million, $135,000, and $421. Number 4, the Los Angeles Lakers. Number 3, the LA Clippers. Number 2, the Brooklyn Nets. And who would have fucking guessed at number 1, the Golden State Warriors? They have the highest payroll in all of basketball. That's like being surprised that the Yankees have a fucking insane start to the season this year. No shit. Like, what are we talking? Yeah, of course the Warriors are good. They have paid to lock down the single best nucleus basketball has had over the last half decade.
Yeah.
Steph Curry broke the all-time three-point record this year. Draymond Green missed a bunch of games. We were like, holy shit, Draymond's so valuable, because he is. And Klay Thompson's played for this team for the first time in 2 years. And while I do not agree with Klay Thompson being worth the money he's being paid this year, this team is still insanely good. And that's failing to mention the fact that they have a guy in Andrew Wiggins, who is a former first overall pick. Jordan Poole has ascended to a level that not even myself had predicted coming into the year. Golden State was supposed to win this series. They were supposed to win last series as well, and they did, because whenever you look at the grand scheme of it, Denver has the 9th highest payroll in basketball, and 2 of their big money guys didn't touch the fucking court this season. Memphis has the 2nd lowest payroll in basketball. They were supposed to win this series, and the fact that John Morant had people questioning that if this series was going to go the Grizzlies' way is a testament to what they're doing out in Memphis.
Yeah.
Golden State has proven to me in this playoff run that they are beatable. They are human. This is not the greatest team on earth shit we saw whenever Kevin Durant said, fuck this, I'm going to the Bay. Like, this team is human. When you hit them, they bleed. People acted like Gary Payton Jr. got shot in the forehead whenever Dylan Brooks clocked him in the head and he broke his elbow. It's an unfortunate circumstance. Dirty play, whatever you want to call it. It was a hard foul, and Payton fell in the worst way possible. But if your entire season is going to rely upon the fact that your third string point guard can't play minutes in the playoffs, you got bigger problems, just in my opinion. So, yes, the Golden State Warriors are still the Golden State Warriors. Their starting lineup on ESPN is gross to look at. You've got Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Jonathan Kuminga, and Draymond Green. Obviously, you swap out Kuminga, put Green at the 4. Looney plays the 5. That should be their day in and day out starting group. The thing that scares me about Golden State currently, under current construction, is their lack of perimeter defense. Ja Morant was exposing everybody on the roster. Gary Payton was slowing him down, but they had nobody to stop that guy. And a big problem they're going to find in this Western Conference Finals is there's a dude on the other side that nobody on the planet has stopped for the last 2 months. So to sit here and think that Klay Thompson or Andrew Wiggins or Kuminga or any of these individual guys can stop Luka Doncic is a tough pill to swallow for me.
Let's get to Luka Doncic. The man who had 27 points at the half, and so did the Phoenix Suns. Look, I said it when the Cowboys did it to Washington, so I'm going to say it now. The Dallas Mavericks beat the shit out of the Phoenix Suns in Phoenix in a Game 7 and made them look stupid. It was 57-27 at the half. Phoenix outscored Denver in the fourth quarter 40-31, but they still lost by 33 points. Luka Doncic had 35 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists. Spencer Dinwiddie with 30 points for Spencer Dinwiddie, 24 for Jalen Brunson. The solid 5 for Jay Crowder, 5 for DeAndre Ayton, 11 for Devin Booker, 10 for Chris Paul. The Suns were just going off, man. Luka Doncic is Luka is a problem.
Yeah, he's a huge problem. Phoenix, they fooled me to a certain extent. This team looked really human against the Pelicans in their opening series. They won 64 games. Not a lot of teams in NBA history can claim that. A big thing looking back at this Phoenix Suns team is looking at the conference and the division they played in this year. Aside from the Golden State Warriors, the Pacific Division was the biggest disappointment in all of basketball. Not for lack of effort. It's just every other team got injured to shit. The Lakers, Davis and LeBron missed almost combined basically a full year of basketball, and they never were able to line up with their health to play at the same time. Westbrook missed games. Kawhi Leonard didn't touch a basketball for all of 2022. So the Pacific Division was Golden State and Phoenix basically playing tag on seeing who they could beat the shit out of the most at the bottom part of this division. Houston sucked. New Orleans was garbage for most of the year. Oklahoma City's a dumpster fire. Portland sucked. Utah is Utah. Denver had most of their guys out besides Jokic. Minnesota is Minnesota. Phoenix put up 64 wins, and I'm not going to call it the weakest Western Conference we've seen in about half a decade, but this is not your typical Western Conference. There were so many big-name guys that did not play this year due to injury or whatever it may be. So just looking at their record at 64-18 and watching them lose to this Dallas team kind of makes sense. This is the same team
2-0 in the series, and then you play a team like the Pelicans, who they went tied with. The Pelicans went hard at them for a little while, but then they ended up getting over the Pelicans.
And the Pelicans were without arguably their best player all year, Zion Williamson. Name a roster Phoenix has beaten over the last 2 years in the playoffs that didn't have major injuries. You can't. You cannot do it. Anthony Davis against the Lakers. Jamal Murray against the Nuggets. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard against the Clippers. And they damn near beat the Bucks, but Giannis said, fuck that, my knee's going to work. And it did for 4 straight games. So they beat the Pelicans pushed them in a way that I did not see happening. And honestly, when you smell smoke, there's a fire. No shame to Monty Williams. He coached an amazing year. 64-18 is nothing to shake a stick at. But if I'm going to shit down,
I think the biggest thing to say is that we're not necessarily like saying Phoenix is a bad team or anything like that, and we understand that injuries happen. But the problem in this series was that a team finally came at Phoenix fully healthy, and they collapsed.
and the biggest thing about it for me is this team had every opportunity to kind of like improve or gear up for this playoff push. They traded Jalen Smith for a pack of cigarettes like halfway through the year. They decided they weren't going to pick up his player option or this team option after this year. He's a rookie scale player that you have for an extra year after this year. There's been speculation about the fact that they might not re-sign DeAndre Ayton for most of this year. And like I said earlier, Jay Crowder's a worse PJ Tucker, in my opinion. Mikal Bridges, insane defender. I thought he was Defensive Player of the Year for a good chunk of the year. But if we're going to shit down the throat of Doc Rivers, Chris Paul, open the fuck up. Because I don't care how you feel about Chris Paul. That's fine and dandy. His body is like Joel. It has not held up ever aside from last year. Because even after yesterday, ESPN and the Twitterverse are coming up with, Chris Paul had a quadricep injury throughout the entirety of the Western Conference semifinals. Then why the fuck didn't we hear about it? It sounds like sour grapes to me. And Devin Booker, for as good as he is, talked a lot of shit this postseason run. And whenever it came down to it, he did not back it up. I'm going to pull up the box score from this game because, man, say the Phoenix Suns came out flat is an insult to artwork. They were terrible last night.
They were bad.
It was a sham.
27 points in the first half of a Game 7 at home.
Home.
It's pathetic. It is absolutely pathetic to throw up that kind of performance in a do or die game. The game, even when it was 0-0 and started, never felt close. Like that's the problem. Never at any point was somebody like, the Suns are going to come back and win this. No, the Mavs beat the shit out of them.
And it's crazy to me because Devin Booker, this whole tandem of CP3 and Devin Booker, we're talking the most shit throughout this entire series. Chris Paul flops like an idiot all the time. There was a trend on Twitter where people just like take screen caps from the game of Devin Booker looking like he was getting shot as Jalen Brunson was defending him on the perimeter. It was insane. You would think he was giving birth the facial expressions he was making. But in a winner-take-all elimination game, the biggest game arguably of Devin Booker's young career aside from the finals, you get 11 points. Chris Paul, one of the biggest games of not the biggest games of his career, but the biggest game of his season, and one where you look at it and say, well, Chris Paul, like, what did you do whenever your team needed you the most? 10 points, 4 assists. The best scorer for the Suns this game was Cameron fucking Johnson, which, no disrespect to Cam Johnson, stud for North Carolina, dropped like 40 against the Knicks earlier this year. It's the Knicks. What do we expect?
But in that situation, he should not be.
Cameron Johnson cannot be your leading scorer with 12 points for the game in a Game 7 of the Western Conference second round. People were sitting here and comparing Devin Booker to Kobe Bryant. And I never did that. I think Devin Booker is a fine and dandy player. I don't like Devin Booker, the defender. I think offensively he is solid. Mm-hmm. We were acting like Luka Doncic and Devin Booker was a fucking conversation. I don't think Devin Booker's even in the same league as Luka Doncic right now. What Luka has done for the first 4 postseasons in his career is nothing short but amazing. He's literally outpacing Michael Jordan. Granted, Michael played a full career's worth of playoff games, but we have not seen anybody with this track record this early. Luka arrived as soon as he put his fucking shoes on for his first NBA game. And pardon my French whenever I'm speaking, but it is insane. And if you look at the rosters top to bottom, the Suns should have ran the Mavs off the court. Mm-hmm. Essentially, the Suns had to shut down Luka and make Jalen and Spencer did when he beat them. They didn't shut Luka down, and Jalen and Spencer beat them the hell up. You take the points of if you take away every point scored aside from Luka, Jalen, and Spencer, the Suns win by 6. There's no way this team beats anybody playing like that.
Yeah.
It's really eye-opening to watch a team that has looked so dominant for a calendar year go out like that.
Yeah.
So it's a make or miss league. The Suns will come back next year. I need to see who Chris Paul is. For as much shit as James Harden got for regressing this year, Chris Paul can't keep getting away with it. I know he went vegan, but father time comes for everybody.
Yeah.
And for a guy that was getting MVP buzz for a chunk of this year, I just don't think we're ever going to talk about Chris Paul in that light, or we shouldn't again until he proves us otherwise. He's had better roster. He's had better teammates, better rosters, better coaches. None of it fucking matters. And partially it's not his fault because he gets injured, but at the same time, the best ability is availability. So until Paul can stay healthy or he can prove it on the biggest stage, I'm done having these conversations. That's just my opinion.
So then we'll change the conversation. We'll just start in the West since we're already on the West. You got the Mavericks, you got the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors will hold home field advantage.
They do have home
court advantage, I should say. You talked about how Ja Morant really destroyed the Golden State Warriors along the perimeter. You expect Luka to do the same. Is that too far to say, or do you expect Luka to have a good time?
I expect Luka to have a great series. I don't expect him to dominate in the same way that Ja Morant did, because Ja Morant and Luka are drastically different players. Luka's a far better shooter, I think he's a better distributor, better rebounder, but he's nowhere near as athletic as Ja Morant is. And Ja's speed and athleticism really made it hard for the Warriors. Luka beats you by just pounding the rock and just exhausting you guys. He's strong, he's deliberate, and he's just supremely talented. I think the teams match up extremely well. I don't know if there's I think Jalen Brunson gets thrown on Steph Curry to start the series, and I think Jalen's going to play his heart out. Jalen Brunson's a really good defender, and he's a super tough point guard / shooting guard. I'm having a tough time picking out who's going to defend Luka for the series, because Klay, he's long enough, but since the injuries, I just don't think he has the lateral quickness.
Who's Draymond covering? Dinwiddie?
Draymond, I guess, could defend Luka, but I don't expect him to be every possession. Draymond's probably on a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith for the series and playing some help defense a lot of the time, because Finney-Smith can hit a jumper and he's their starting power forward. This Mavs team is just really, really interesting because Spencer Dinwiddie provides a lot of floor spacing. Davis Bertans, for as little defenses he played in Washington, was one of the best shooters I had seen playing in San Antonio. So he spreads the floor. Reggie Bullock is an underrated three guy.
That's what Luka kind of needs. It's what, it's what LeBron's always needed. It's what all the greats
shooters
need.
Floor spacers.
You need somebody to take the attention off of you, or not necessarily take the attention off you, but to step up when all the attention is on you. LeBron had Kyrie Irving, and that's all I have in my head at the moment. But, the greats have somebody to make the other team pay when they're not paying attention to them. And Luka has that.
Yeah.
So does that mean you will pick the Mavericks to take the series?
Out of respect for what Golden State has been for basketball, I think this series should go Dallas in 7. I have a feeling. I think the more realistic outcome, based upon what we have seen this playoff and what I know teams are capable of, I think Dallas has a harder time stopping a combination of Steph, Jordan, Poole, and Klay than the Warriors have stopping just Luka Doncic. It's all going to depend on the tertiary or the ancillary pieces. I think Luka and Steph is going to be one of the best back and forths we'll probably see in the playoffs this year. Mm-hmm. My money is going to be bet on whether or not Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie can outplay Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson. I think the Warriors
are you in the spot where it's hard to bet against the Golden State Warriors because
exactly
here?
It would be disrespectful. Their coach has
Yeah.
been there. I'm not in love with Jason Kidd as a coach. I've seen really great things this season from him. He's unlocked something defensively with this team that we didn't see over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But Draymond is a guy that they can throw out there with those death lineups, and I just don't know how they combat against that whenever you have Kuminga, Wiggins, Thompson, Curry, because that's another thing. They're going to have bodies to throw at Luka Doncic. They're going to tire him out at some point because Wiggins is not everyone's favorite player, but he is athletic as hell. Whenever you get him engaged, he's going to play hard, and he's going to play pretty tough defense. My money's on Golden State in 6. If Dallas wins this series, do not be surprised. If Luka Doncic is the first ever Western Conference Finals MVP, do not be surprised. Luka Doncic has ascended to a level that I expected to happen eventually, but he's in year 3 or year 4, and he's not slowing down anytime soon. It's just as simple as I think the key to Golden State in this series is how much they get out of Klay Thompson. If Klay can't be efficient and score at least 18 to 24 points a game, they're going to have a tough time. Because whenever Klay was struggling, they struggled against Memphis, even without a guy like John Morant in the lineup. You saw in Game 6, the Warriors played their game. Klay had a vintage Game 6 Klay performance. He drops 30. Golden State wins comfortably. Klay Thompson provides a dynamic for this team that without him makes them way more beatable. Because if he's not scoring, it's a lot harder to keep him out there defensively because he is not what you used to have on this roster. This Golden State team is no longer a team that can field lineups with Andre Iguodala, the guy that shut down LeBron James in 2015. Kevin Durant, one of the best help defenders the NBA has seen in terms of protecting the rim. And Klay Thompson, a guy that for a large portion of his career was a top 3 defensive shooting guard in all of basketball. You're not throwing him on the best player to shut them down anymore. And that's not his fault. After an Achilles and an ACL back-to-back, that lateral speed, it's very hard to get back to where you were at. So if Klay can be what I've seen Klay be in the past, yeah, that's great. But I just don't expect that anymore, especially defensively. So if he can't provide the offensive punch they need, it's going to be tough because Jordan Poole's not defending Jalen Brunson or Luka. Steph Curry is a great team defender, but he's not going to be able to D up these guys one-on-one. If Dallas puts people on islands and Luka's just allowed to score, they can compete with anybody. But if Golden State hits the drawing board and they actually come up with a thought-out plan to go out there and actually play this team as hard as they can, it's hard to pick against them.
So with our last 10 minutes left, I know you spoke on it a little bit earlier. You talked about how Boston will need to get creative if they want to get by Miami. So it sounds like you're on the Miami train currently, but what does Boston need to do in terms of creativity if they wanted to get over the hump that is the Miami Heat?
So I'm a Lakers fan, so it's hard to pick Boston in anything. My buddy called me the other night and I was like, yeah, I think Milwaukee's going to win, but it'd be cool to see Boston win. That's what I told him. Boston and Miami are very similar teams. If you look at them top to bottom, they have the superstars. They have veterans. They have guys that have won. They have depth. I think the biggest thing for me in this series, whenever it's close, you go to best player on the court. That's either Jason Tatum or Jimmy Butler. I think Tatum offensively right now might have Jimmy beat, but in terms of defense, Jimmy's one of the best two-way guys on the planet. And whenever it's super close between superstar to superstar, you go with depth. And whenever the depth is there, this is going to be the closest series the playoffs has seen. It could go 5, it could go 7. It's a coin flip. I think anybody can beat anybody in this series, regardless of home court advantage. Miami draws home court advantage as the 1 seed in the East. I think for me, I've got Miami winning it, not just because of Kyle Lowry. If Kyle Lowry doesn't play, Boston has a really, really good shot to win this series. If Kyle Lowry's finally healthy and playing in games, it becomes that much more difficult. And I just think Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the playoffs remaining, and that matters. Whenever the games get close and you have to make adjustments, I don't know if there's a team built better left in the playoffs to make game-by-game adjustments and change on the fly than this Miami team is. This is a team, like I said before, Duncan Robinson is on a contract where he's getting paid $90 million over 4 or 5 years. They played him almost a total of 3 minutes through 5 games in that last series. Spoelstra is not too proud to bench guys, and he is willing to play players that are going to contribute to winning. So while I think their starting fives are very similar in terms of talent, and I think their top ends are super close along with their bench depth, I'm going to go with what my brain and gut have always told me to do in choosing the best head coach. Mm-hmm. Because talent sometimes fails you. Coaching, the thing about coaching is it's philosophy based. There's no hard science to it. Coaches do things and they either work or they don't. As we see with Doc Rivers year in and year out, certain things he does for some reason don't translate. Eric Spoelstra, for lack of better terms, it's always worked. Even whenever the talent's not there, he's led teams to the playoffs that we didn't think were going to be there.
Right.
And same thing with Miami this year. If you would have told me coming into the season that Miami was the 1 seed in the East, I would have looked at you like you were a leper or something, like you had leprosy. But Eric Spoelstra coaches to the best of his abilities and gets the most out of the players that he coaches. So it's going to be hard fought. I got Miami in 7. I could see Boston winning it in 7 as well. It's going past 5 games. It's going to be 6 or 7 games. I'm leaning towards 7. And as of right now, with a fully healthy roster, you give me Kyle Lowry, give me the Heat.
Yeah, I also have Miami in 7. I think they finish it off at home.
Because home court's huge too.
Yeah, I feel like too. You take these 4 teams and the Mavs, the Warriors, the Celtics, and the Heat, and it feels like a very even playing field. Yeah. Feels like all these teams are very good. All these teams have very small weaknesses, and they have extremely big strengths. For the Heat, it's Eric Spoelstra. For the Celtics, it's creativity, young talent, Jason Tatum. For the Mavs, it's Luka, obviously, and the guys that are around him. And Golden State is just Golden State. They've always been that way. We've always known what Golden State is, and we just haven't been able to stop them. I think Golden State wins in 7 because there's just no reason for me to pick against Golden State until they lose. They did play a tough team in Memphis and did look a little weak sometimes to Ja Morant, but as long as they keep finding ways to win series, there's no reason for me to say that they can't win a series after another, regardless of how tired they get, how many games it goes, et cetera, et cetera. So that would put us at the Heat and the Warriors in the finals. Yeah. We might have time to break it down later in the month when these 2 series end. So without breaking it down too hard, I would say I love the Heat. I think they constantly find ways to win games. I think Jimmy Butler is an outstanding player that doesn't get enough credit. I think that whole cancer in a locker room thing for him followed him around, whether he was or not, and brought down his reputation a little bit. But as a player overall, Jimmy Butler wins. He's done it, but
money talks,
and the Warriors don't lose.
If Golden State makes the finals and they're playing somebody besides Boston, it's going to be real hard because I can't guarantee that Kyle Lowry gives you 2 full series of health after this season. Yeah. He's been in and out of the lineup constantly. And Boston, Golden State, that's kind of a toss-up. You can't bet against a fully healthy Golden State. I have yet to see that. Like, as much as I love to say I'm going to bet on the Lakers if there's a fully healthy LeBron and Anthony Davis, I'd be hypocrite. It would be hypocritical of me to say the same thing about a fully healthy Golden State team.
Right. Like, obviously, if Steph goes down, then okay, hold up, different ball game. But a fully healthy Golden State lineup just isn't going to lose most of the time.
Because even in 2016, Bogut goes down, Draymond gets suspended. Whenever they're at full strength, we really haven't seen them lose a series. And granted, those Durant teams were insane. Golden State is human, but I'm not saying they are super beatable by any stretch. There are blueprints there, but they still have Steve Kerr. They still have Steph Curry, and for as little as Draymond has done offensively compared to his peak seasons, Draymond can still score the ball, and he's one of the best playmakers they have. And for the lack of Iggy and the fact that Clay isn't who he was 2-3 years ago, they now have guys like Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, and Jordan Poole. And that's not even putting into account Andrew Wiggins, because the last time they didn't have Durant, they had a guy in Harrison Barnes in 2016 that shit the bed. Do I expect Wiggins to be that bad? Fuck no. He's like a career 21-point scorer. He averaged 15 points a game this year and was an all-star starter.
Yeah.
They have the best team on paper comparatively to every team left in the field, aside from depth being brought into question. But even then, with depth included, you got 4 max level contract guys, and Jordan Poole is going to get paid damn near a max whenever he's due for a contract. So it's going to be fun. That's all I have to say. My team's not in it, so I'm just ready for some great basketball.
Yeah, sometimes that's all you can ask for. So that's going to do it for us. A rare basketball episode, but we're in a nice little spot where me and Grant did a huge MLB recap last week. Football's a little stagnant right now with the draft, finishing, and we don't need to cover divisions for another couple months before that chaos ensues. So Devin loves talking basketball. I love learning basketball. So I sit here and kind of like sitting when your grandpa is telling you stories. You're just like,
dude, we're going to do one of those like long form deep dive basketball episodes, and I'm going to teach you a lot, because I've been getting into some conversations on the internet just about like all-time greats and stuff like that, and how at any sport, I think there's a conversation to be had, and how we address and understand all-time rankings and how we view players as they could play in any era. Because if I'm going to put Babe Ruth in today's MLB, Babe Ruth is born. Say if we're going to put Babe Ruth into the 2022 MLB season, I'm saying he's born in 1995, 1992. Because taking a 34-year-old man that has the nutrition of a 1930s individual, he's not going to really play well compared to these mega athletes that have nutritionists by the time they're 16. So you have to give them what the other players around them had. It's like if you dropped Giannis today into the 1930s, no shit. He's physically better than everybody because of years of evolution. So, but it's a pleasure talking basketball. I'm just happy to be back. It was a week-long hiatus, but as Cam Newton so eloquently put, my friends, I'm back. I just need to rip my helmet off next time.
And the best part about Devin being back, well, real quick, we do have a lot of deep dive episodes coming up. We're looking into topics and such to talk about, but we need time to research, and I didn't think about today's topic until last night, so didn't have time to research anything.
Well, when are we doing the pace of play?
Great question.
I've got stuff down, dude. I'm gonna keep working on that one.
I'll have to find my college paper. So I don't have to be awkward this time. Devin gets to sign us off.
Well, from the bottom of our hearts, the makeshift managers, thank you guys for tuning in, whether it was live or whether you're listening to my soulful voice through your ears on Spotify. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. If you're a Suns fan, there's always next year. If you're a Bucks fan, pray to Chris Middleton. And if you're a Mavs fan, enjoy Luka, because, man, he's a treasure. But from Devin and Austin to everybody listening,